This episode is brought to you by Alumni Q. For over 20 years, Alumni Q has been partnering with higher education institutions to build real, lasting connections that drive engagement, whether through events, volunteer management, or personalized fundraising strategies. Their software is designed to meet busy, accomplished alumni where they are, making it easier to connect, communicate, and involve them in meaningful ways. From personalized event experiences to targeted communications, Alumni Q ensures your constituents feel seen and valued. With 96% of clients staying with them long term, Alumni Q's active support and responsive development make sure you always have the tools you need when you need them. If you're looking for a trusted partner that truly understands higher education and is committed to helping your institution succeed, consider Alumni Q, powering the connections that last. Visit Alumni Q. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for listening to Alumless for Friday, May 9th, 2025. This is the From the Board to Alumni Leader edition. I'm Ryan Catherwood, and I am joined by my colleague, founder, and CEO of CMAC, Chris Marshall. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, Ryan. How are you, man? Good to see you.
You hanging in there? You've had something of a busy travel week, I'd say.
Yeah, I got in at 4 o'clock this morning and got a good 30 minutes of sleep and ready to go.
Man, I'll tell you, every morning this week I've thought of you just because of the news stories about the Newark airport and the challenges it's having, sort of making national news. I'm like, that's Chris Marshall's home airport. He flies out of there like 5 times a week.
I got canceled 3 times on flights earlier this week. I finally got one out that got me to where I needed to go. So I survived it.
Planes, trains, and automobiles, right? On the show, we talk about engagement strategies and education advancement, and we are live today with our special guest, Heather Stanley from Western Michigan University. Been excited for this one. If you're tuning in, please let us know in the comments by saying hello and what school you represent. But also, if you have any questions for Chris or myself, or perhaps you've got some questions for today's special guest, Heather Stanley, go ahead and pop them into the event there on LinkedIn. We can see them in our StreamYard interface, and we'd love to either tackle them here in our live session or our bonus edition. And if you haven't already, of course, subscribe to the bonus edition of Alumless to hear our 30-minute bonus segment with each of our special guests. Of course, if you're listening to us by podcast right now, we appreciate you, and we are grateful for Steve Rittler and the team at Alumni Q for their partnership with us, being a presenting sponsor of Alumless. All right, Chris. Well, I was excited for this show because we really have not tackled this topic before in any kind of substantive way. And it's interesting because we often talk about the value of alumni boards, of course, but we don't really talk about how service as a volunteer on the board might prepare someone to be in the leadership role of, within the university advancement or the Alumni Association. But what are the top reasons you think it might be the right time or the right era or inflection point for someone who comes from the board to lead an alumni program?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I actually think there are reasons why it's not the right person to bring from the staff. The person we're bringing on today, obviously, is the right person because you know her better than I do, but has done an amazing job. I think it comes down to the person's temperament understanding. You have to understand the balance, the role of the board. Most importantly, if you have a dysfunctional board and bringing one of those leaders to run is not going to work necessarily. Having a board that is fully engaged, the old noses in, fingers out, they understand that role. That kind of leader who gets that perspective will come to this role with a full understanding of how to use that board and then how to draw the line clearly between what the staff's doing and what the board is doing. And that's where I think it makes sense. I've seen where it didn't work. And there's a good number of them, building number of them over the years I've been doing this, where I've seen it actually work quite well. And it's about temperament, understanding the role and understanding the place of a board versus of the staff. I think that's the key points that I would point to.
Yeah, I think that those are all good thoughts. Chris, you're someone that has worked at your alma mater as the alumni leader. And I know this is a little different, right? I know you've had volunteer opportunities over the years with your alma mater, but do you think this would change the relationship fundamentally an individual might have to go from volunteer to staff like that?
Yeah. I bet, and Heather's listening in the green room, as we call it, and I bet when she comes on, she can tell me whether or not I'm right on this one. But when volunteer role, you're you're kind of on the stage, but still in front of the curtain. And when you get into the staff role, you see behind the curtain. And you see, the other metaphor is you see how the sausage really gets made. And there were times where I've seen volunteer leaders shift into these roles, even myself, when I moved from a staff member in one role to another role, a leadership role, and you see what really goes on at the institution, where you're like, I don't know if I wanted to know that about my alma mater. So that's the one thing I'm really curious to see what Heather shares on this topic, as she's done several months now. Has she found things about the university, about alma mater, that she's really wish she hadn't known about? Maybe or not. Maybe she won't even share them on the call, but we'll see what she said.
I know for a fact Heather has had some eye-opening moments. The question of which ones she shares will be. Let's bring Heather out to the screen. There she is, Heather Stanley. How are you?
Hey,
Hello, I'm doing great. Thank you all for having me. I was laughing in the green room, Chris. I was like, oh yeah, we're teeing it up this morning.
I had a
How
feeling.
real will it get?
Heather Stanley is the Senior Director for Alumni Experience at Western Michigan University. All right, Heather, let's get things going. Just let's share a little bit about your background. I teed it up a little bit that, of course, you've had a role on the alumni board, which, of course, makes you a graduate of Western. But maybe share a little bit about, how you came to serve on the alumni board, and a little bit about your transition to Senior Director. What compelled you to apply for the role when it opened?
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, official, thank you so much, Chris and Ryan, for inviting me to be a part of Alumless today. When Ryan first mentioned this to me a couple of months ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'll have anything to share. I'm so new, 6 months in, almost officially 6 months in here. I've had some learnings. And so I'm really excited to be here and to talk to both of you today. So it's an honor. And it was also an honor to serve on the Western Michigan Alumni Association Board of Directors for 4 years. I really got into it by way of, I was just kind of looking for more of an opportunity. I was looking to be on a board, actually. I wanted to do some board service. And when I sort of found out a little bit more about the alumni board, I spoke with some alumni that are near and dear to my heart. And they said, oh, yeah, let's connect you with advancement, which I didn't even really know about university advancement. I really hadn't necessarily kind of heard about or understood what that department did. And so kind of went through the interview process and all of that, and just got more and more excited about this opportunity to serve. And they selected me, and was really excited to roll on to the board. And with that, having experience, and I know we'll talk a little bit about my background not being in higher ed, but in K-12, had worked with a lot of school boards. So I really came on with this idea of, and I know Chris talked about this, of the role of a board member. So I didn't come on with my own agenda. It was really truly about my love for my alma mater and what can I do to help? What can I do to support? Not really thinking I would end up in this seat. So it's kind of an interesting story about how I got here. There are a couple of things that compelled me there. As you know, Ryan, having worked with us and consulted with us for several years now, there was a lot of transition in this office in alumni relations in advance. And being on the outside of that as a board member, that really impacted our experiences as a board. Some of those experiences were still positive and some were not quite as positive. And I watched, new board colleagues, new friends that I had made, fellow alum that were rolling off of the board, not in a good place. And just kind of my personality it was just like, it just hurt my heart that they were having these experiences. And it was, it was like, it wasn't in my control, but like, how can we help this? And so we went through another iteration where we hired someone not in my exact role. And that person was, it was just a short tenure. And so when this role came out and they sort of rethought through what the role should be, they talked to the board and asked us, think about who's in your network, who might you think would be a good fit for this. And so I was looking through it with that lens. Okay, who do I know? Who could I get to apply for this? We need somebody in there that's going to have a little time that's going to be invested in us. And the more I looked through it, I promise you, I read through it like 3 times before the light bulb really went from dim to fully bright. Three. It was good. It was a good three. Yeah. I was like, what? Maybe I could do this. And it came on the heels of a few things. I had gone to Women in Leadership Conference, and they talked specifically about how women will look at a job description, and if they don't fit 100% of those bullets, they will not apply. So I had that ringing in my head. I had a former mentor who many years ago, when I was at an inflection point in my teaching career, she said to me, you have to seize an opportunity in its lifetime. And that has stuck with me. And then I had someone plant a seed a couple of years ago, strangely enough, that had worked at Western and said to me, have you ever thought about working in fundraising? And I said, no, I don't like asking people for money. And this person said to me, it's not about money, it's about building relationships. And you really have like a, a knack for that. So it was kind of like the seed was planted and watered at different points to get me to this moment of third time read. Okay, maybe I should go for this. And it was a good time for me personally and professionally to really rethink, okay, maybe it's time for me to switch it up. So the worst that could happen is somebody said no, so I went for it and they said yes.
Well, you're definitely the right person at the right time, and it's been so great to watch your growth over the last 6 months. But let's talk about those first 6 months on the job. What's it been like? You actually happened to arrive, and then this crazy thing happened, which is you won a national college hockey championship. And
Mhm.
listeners, I am holding up a national championship hockey souvenir hockey puck that I got at a board meeting out there. Really a galvanizing event, but certainly, Heather, something that had never happened at the
Right.
university before, a huge event. Just talk a little bit about your first 6 months and then the hockey championship.
Absolutely. Well, my first 6 months have been exciting, challenging, invigorating, and maybe most of all exhausting. I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a lot to do, but it is truly invigorating. It's exciting to be here, and you know, I there's been a lot going on in this transition. We've had some changes in our leadership here in advancement. We have a new president that was just announced a couple of weeks ago. So our president had announced his retirement, had time for the search. So within my 6 months, I'm seeing a lot of leadership transition, which can mean a lot of, it can mean a new era. It's as you've called it, Ryan, many times, it's an inflection point for the university. So it's exciting. Within university advancement, I've done a lot of learning about exactly what Chris said earlier, seeing behind the curtain. And, it has been drinking from a fire hose and just really like taking it all in of how all of the pieces work together and how this alumni experience is such a foundation for all of the other work that happens. But not only that, really getting out across campus over these past several months, meeting with our partners, meeting with the deans in our academic units, meeting with our other support units, that there's alumni work happening everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And so really thinking about the importance of building those partnerships, just establishing myself as a willing partner to collaborate, it takes time, it takes intention, and it takes effort. So when I was interviewing, I really talked about how my goals were to listen, learn, and lead, and in that order. And so I've done a lot of the listening and learning, also the leading piece of it. I have to get right in here and kind of begin to galvanize a small team and start to build my team out. But a lot of listening and learning, hearing things that have worked, that have not worked, things people would like to see, things they would be happy if they never saw again. So all of those pieces have kind of come together to make it an interesting and fun 6 months. When we go to hockey, I will be honest, because that's all I can be and people know me. I did not begin as a hockey fan. And so I didn't like grow up going to hockey games. I honestly don't even think I went to a game as a student at Western. I'm just telling the truth here. But I went as a board member. I had a couple of board colleagues who were just like, Heather, you haven't been to a hockey game. You have to go to a hockey game. And they would have to tell you about the experience. I don't know if they watched the game or if they watched me, but it was very exciting. So that was some years ago. And to get here, and we were having these conversations in our events teams meetings about, okay, I mean, our hockey team is doing really well. We might be in the tournament and that might look like this, but from it to go to, okay, this may happen to reality, and I'm in St. Louis and I'm with all all of these hockey alum. I had just the opportunity to sit with, several hockey alum who had come there to support, the coach who they played with, current students. I mean, it was just amazing. The community that was felt there, I can barely put it into words, honestly. It was just such an exciting time and will continue to be an exciting opportunity for us. And on the heels of that, we won a national dance championship. We've had
Mm,
several students who just won a digital marketing championship. I'll call it a championship because it's national.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have a lot of, opportunities here to just galvanize the excitement around what it means to be an alum and a friend of Western Michigan University. So we're loving it. I'm just
yeah.
riding the wave.
Full start though to have to go
Mm.
through to get a chance to go through that. Just real quick, shout out to Scott Francis from Auburn, Lindsey Crum from Wayne State, Scott Pesner who says congrats from Cornell to you, by the way, another great
Oh,
hockey, and
hello.
Lisa
Yes.
Tetzler from Vassar. These are some of the listeners who signed in. If you're on, I didn't say your name. Jump in, just say hello. Tell us you're here. Off script question for you, Heather. You can handle it though. What I folks who are new to the role that you're in is that on the average over the course of a year, if there's roughly 20 days a month that are work days and over 12 months, rounding up to 250 days, right, is your work year. I
Okay.
always say that there are about 20% of the time of those 250 days, you're going to be out on the road. 20% of the time, you're going to be out across campus. And then the
Okay.
remaining time is going to be working in the office with your team. So if you boil it down to like a week, right, it means 1 day on the road, 1 day out on campus, and 3 days working across within your team on the. Are
Mm.
you close to that? What's your
Mm.
formula? What's your percentage? What are you looking
Oh,
like right
oh. Oh, my
ballpark?
percentage. Ballpark. Okay. I'm like, wait, hold on. Let me get my pen and paper here and figure this out. No, I'm kidding.
Just roughly. I mean, are you out on the road a lot
Roughly.
more than you expected to be, or
I feel like I'm on the road a little bit more than that. It might just be like from not 1 day, but two, maybe. And I think it's just
yeah?
honestly because I'm meeting so many partners right now and doing a lot of external work at the same time. So also when you said 20 days per month, I was like, well, that's not accurate. I'm working more
Yeah.
than that.
We were just talking about that. You work during the day and then you staff all the events, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So, I was
Yeah.
I told
It's
Ryan
not a 40-hour week gig. You know that.
it's
Yeah. Totally
it's
get
not.
it.
I was like,
Yeah.
I never knew 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. could go so fast. It's just like, what? It's the end of the day already. So, but I am, and I guess that's the balance that I'm trying to strike is how do I get that time? We've set a lot of time aside to work with the team, but then also it's very important to be meeting with our partners and having these
Yeah, that's what
conversations
made me
about
ask
what
you.
things will look like.
You said that earlier that
Yeah.
you're getting out to meet with the alumni director who sits in their office and just manages the staff and does email and some phone calls, is not out on the road, not out on campus building the partnerships that you need to have. And I love
Yeah,
that you said that early on. So that's why I encourage people
for
to
sure.
move that direction. Let me go back on script and
Okay.
ask this one. What's surprised you most so far in the role?
Well, I guess the biggest surprise was again just how quickly 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. goes. But I think for me, the learning around all of the inner workings of advancement in particular, just because, it was not an area I was on the board, so I had the most contact with the alumni relations office. I mean, I knew there were all of these other things that were happening. You've got communications, you've got data that people are looking at and reviewing, you've got all of the development side of things, but just to really, kind of see the entire machine coming together and how people work together and collaborate has been, just a key piece for me to understand how I fit into that puzzle and why my unit is so important to all of that work that needs to be done. I think that's been a big surprise. I will also say, and this is not to disparage my alma mater, which I love so much, but there are a lot of archaic systems, processes, and structures. And it's not that that was so much a surprise, but it was just like, really, this
Yeah,
is this is
yeah.
how we're doing this. So, but I mean, with any institution that's been around over 100 years, you know that you're going to get into some of that. But I think there just were some things that were some surprises of how I would have to manage some of the operational side of
Right. Right.
things. But nothing that can't be handled and maneuvered.
We have found that to be true at every single school we've looked under the hood and said, what's going on here? And we find these operational issues or these, systems issues, and then we bring those to the alumni who expect them not to have those problems. And should have already solved those issues. And most places in higher ed have not. So you're in good company.
Oh, good.
Uh, let me ask you, has your thinking about working with an alumni board evolved at all, changed at all with the new lens that you have?
So, well, and I kind of alluded to this, having had a lot of contact with school boards over the years, and my mother was the lead for a nonprofit. She was an executive director of Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I
Mhm.
knew a lot about how boards could, and I'm going to say it this way, be out of their lane.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And if the lane is not defined for them, I mean, you've got some people who are in oncoming traffic, they're so far out of their lane. So my thought hasn't really changed, but it's really more probably definitive now. And Ryan has really supported me with this and really thinking about how to you have people who are so eager and willing, but
Right.
if you don't give them, defined spaces to live in, then what are people will just naturally say, well, okay, well, I can figure out how to help over here. I have this idea. So really giving people some definition, giving our board some definition. I think I've just sort of doubled down on that in my mind on this side of it. I was much that way as a board member as well. Like, well, we need to be focused on whatever they're asking us to do, not like our own agendas. And so I think it worked well that I was that type of board member. So I don't think it was like a switch up when I got into this role. I'm still the same Heather, but on this side of it, I'm actually able to kind of exercise a little bit more control around those
Yeah.
expectations and really
Yeah.
firming those up.
But the work you're doing managing that board, there's another saying I use on the other side of, there's one that says good boards to have their noses in and fingers out. The other one is that you get the board you deserve. And when you work at it the way you're describing it and are clear about what the roles and responsibilities are and have that lane set up, have priorities and say, we want ideas, but it's got to be within these things, not
Yes.
out here, right? In
Yes.
oncoming traffic. That's the board that's fun to work with, right? That's the one
Mhm.
you look forward to coming to campus, and you deserve that
Absolutely.
because you've worked at it.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the boards that drive you nuts and go outside the lane and drive you crazy are the ones that, they haven't been managed properly, frankly. The volunteer
Yes.
management role of it is critical.
Yes. Absolutely.
Heather, inflection point university wide, you mentioned leadership changes occurring, a
Mhm.
new president just announced coming in over the summer. But I'd imagine that your role and service on the alumni board actually has provided you something of an advantage right now in terms of some behind the scenes and just a lot of understanding about the university. Is that true? Would you say you like at this moment it's you've got an advantage, or maybe share a little bit about your thinking about what that skill set brings to the role?
Sure. I would say I think it was an advantage in my case where I had built some relationships, I had some visibility on campus, was kind of I'm going to use the words in the know, not about the deep things, but I just was more regularly kind of knowing what was happening on campus. So, and then building those relationships with my board colleagues at the time really supported me as I came into this role. And I told no one. I mean, just only my family knew that I was applying. I asked everybody to just kind of keep it quiet. But when my board found out, they were just like, "What? Wow, this is exciting." So, and they could have had a different reaction. So that was good. But I do think it was an advantage because we had built a lot of trust. We had been through, as I talked about, just a lot of transition together. And so I knew what that board experience was and was not. And so my level of commitment to making them feel like it's meaningful, it's impactful. I think they had belief in me and I have belief in them. So I think that works to my advantage as well as just being an alumna too is kind of a unique space. It could, I'm sure it could not go well also, but in that space, I feel kind of a level of dedication that that works well for those that I'm serving, our alumni, our donors, our friends, all of the different our campus partners. there's just kind of a little bit of built-in trust that I had.
I would also sort of imagine, Heather, that if your board colleagues had the chance to sort of vote on someone from the board who would be an excellent alumni leader, they would have voted for you. And that reception that you had got from the board once we announced that you were in the role was fantastic, right? There's clearly you've earned a lot of trust from your colleagues, and that's what makes you such an excellent choice for this moment. But Chris, let me ask you a little bit about sort of this Heather and her credibility from her role on the board. How do you think that will help her right now as she works to sort of accelerate the growth of the alumni program?
Yeah, I mean, you said, I was prepping for the thing and I wrote down one word to help me trigger what I wanted to say here, and you just said it, which is trust. Yeah, that's the foundation of any group dynamic working with, in a higher ed setting or any kind of organization. Starts with trust. And if you can have trust in that leader, then you can do just about anything. So that's my answer. I don't want to belabor it, but I do want to point out, Lisa Tesler in the chat put in a great question that I want to call out, because you were touching on it a little bit here, but let's be specific about it. Your role as a board member vis-a-vis keeping them in their lane. Has that part been helpful for you?
Well, Ryan could give an outside point of view on how that's working out for me, but I will say, I think so we're not there yet, Lisa. I'll report back in give me 3 more months. But I think the beginning of defining roles, it is working out pretty well in terms of, and I've just, again, been very transparent with them. We had a leadership change above me. And so then I was navigating that. So everything for me goes back to the trust piece and that transparency of communication. I think I've sent them more emails than they may have ever received from this office. I text them, I call them, I make sure I'm checking in with them. So all of those pieces are both intentional, and it's just about who I am to make sure that we're all in communication to get us moving and get us in the same lane. So we're still in a 4-lane highway here, but I'm getting them closer. I've got them merging into the right lane.
It'll be interesting to watch if someone goes out the lane, how it's handled. Sometimes groups that are high functioning self-correct, right? Someone else does the work bringing them back in line, and you don't have to do it. But
yes, that is my hope.
Well, I was gonna say, Heather's going from being like a sister, right, a colleague, right, amongst the volunteers, right, to sort of the boss lady, right, and that is a little bit of a different relationship, right, with the volunteers, and it's an evolving one, right. So we have a couple of questions that we did not get to in our first half hour that we will save to the bonus segment. That will.
Brian, I was supposed to ask you who's up next on Alumless.
Yeah, who's up next? So next week, Alumless World, we have Cheng Feng from Duke Kunshan University in China. So Duke University has an international campus in China, and we had a great conversation about basically advancement at a startup university in China. So Nicole and I had a conversation. We'll broadcast that next Friday. And then we've got our friend Pete Brumbaugh from Mid-America Nazarene University the following week on Alumless. Excited to talk with Pete. And Pete works at Mid-America Nazarene, which is a small size faith-based institution that's got a great alumni population and network of similar institutions. And we're going to talk to Pete all about his work there with Mid-America Nazarene. All right, well, we're going to say goodbye for today, and we'll record our bonus section with Heather Stanley from Western Michigan University, and we'll be back in your feed in a week's time. Thank you to Steve Rittler and the team at Alumni Q for being our presenting sponsor, and we'll be back after the break for you podcast listeners.
Thank you.